Hello, and welcome to Historical Humans Reads, where we take primary sources and bring them to your screen. I'm Colum Coleman, and today we are reading from The Female Husband, or The Surprising History of Mrs. Mary, alias Mr. George Hamilton, who was convicted of having married a young woman of Wales and lived with her as her husband, is a heavily fictionalized account of the life of Mary Hamilton, who was convicted of fraud after marrying Mary Price under the fictional identity of Charles Hamilton in 1746. That same year, English novelist Henry Fielding anonymously published his moralizing and highly imaginative account of the events in The Female Husband. The real Mary, or rather Charles Hamilton, is regarded by historians to be a visible instance of a trans person in 18th century Britain. Today we will be reading parts 13 through 20 of The Female Husband by Henry Fielding. With that, let's begin. In the midst of these agonies, she received a letter from Mrs. Johnson in the following words, or as near them as she can possibly remember. Dear Molly, I know you will condemn what I have now done, but I condemn myself much more for what I have done formerly. For I take the whole shame and guilt of what hath passed between us on myself. I was indeed the first seducer of your innocence, for which I ask God's pardon and yours. All the amends I can make you is earnestly to beseech you, in the name of the Lord, to forsake all such evil courses, and to follow my example now, as you did before my temptation. And enter as soon as you can into that holy state into which I yesterday was called, in which, though I am yet but a novice, believe me, there are delights infinitely surpassing the faint endearments that we have experienced together. I shall always pray for you, and continue your friend. This letter rather incensed than abated her rage, and she resolved to go immediately and upbraid her false friend. But while she was taking this resolution, she was informed that Mr. Rogers and his bride were departed from Bristol by a messenger, who brought her a second short note and a bill for some money from Mrs. Rogers. As soon as the first violence of her passion subsided, she began to consult what course to take, when the strangest thought imaginable suggested itself to her fancy. This was to dress herself in men's clothes, to embark for Ireland, and to commence a Methodist teacher. Nothing remarkable happened to her during the rest of her stay at Bristol, which adverse winds occasioned to be a whole week, after which she provided herself with her dress, but at last having procured a passage, and the wind becoming favorable, she set sail for Dublin. As she was a very pretty woman, she now appeared a most beautiful youth, a circumstance which had its consequences aboard the ship, and had like to have discovered her in the very beginning of her adventures. There happened to be in the same vessel with this adventurer a Methodist, who was bound to the same place, on the same design with herself. These two being alone in the cabin together, and both at their devotions, the man, in the ecstasy of his enthusiasm, thrust one of his hands onto the other's bosom, upon which, in her surprise, she gave so effeminate a squall that it reached the captain's ears as he was smoking his pipe upon the deck. "Heyday," says he, "what have we a woman on the ship?" and immediately descended to the cabin, where he found the two Methodists on their knees. "Pox on't," said the captain, "I thought you had had a woman with you here. I could have sworn I had heard one cry out as if she had been ravishing. And yet the devil must have been in you, if you could convey her in here without my knowledge." "I defy the devil and all his works," answered the Methodist. "He has no power but over the wicked, and if he be on the ship, thy oaths must have brought him hither, for I have heard thee pronounce more than 20 since I came aboard. And we should have been at the bottom before this, had not my prayers prevented it." "Don't abuse my vessel," cried the captain. "She is a safe vessel. and as good a sailor as ever floated. And if you had been afraid of going to the bottom, you might have stayed on shore and been damned. The Methodist made no answer, but felt a groaning that so loud that the captain, giving him a hearty curse or two, quitted the cabin and resumed his pipe. This has been an excerpt from The Female Husband on Historical Humans Reads. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more excerpts from original texts, please subscribe to be notified of the next one. If there is a work you would like to hear, be sure to like the video and leave a comment listing it below. Thank you for listening.